Should I not move my hands too much? Hi, my name is Vernon Malapas, and I work at our lens team here at Snap. I primarily work with animation and some rigging for face lenses, world lenses, sponsored lenses, all that stuff. I think what it's like working is very collaborative and creative. For us, the whole team is very much open to everyone's ideas. So whenever you get some free time of work, you can use that extra time to build your creations, maybe look up for videos, what's trending, what can we build. And I think that whole collaborative spirit is very much a testament of how our products are built. It's just that back and forth of creativity and knowledge and skill, and which is really fun. So in our team, we have a couple of team members that work primarily in researching the next cultural event for maybe a country in Asia or maybe a country in Europe. When is today like an Independence Day and stuff like that. So we have this team that really tracks what's happening globally. Be researched and prepared to make sure that everyone is included and everyone has this AR lens experience that is unique to their culture. On my free time, I do some special effects where I shoot a footage and I put in 3D objects. I make sure I capture the illumination of the environment and render everything them out. So it's not real time, it's more of a VFX pipeline. But I think the idea is very close to AR, where basically your world is your canvas. Oh, this one was around when there was shortage of toilet paper. It's just funny stuff. I think the whole concept is changing something ordinary into something extraordinary with the help of animation, VFX, augmented reality. So I think those really merge well together, art and technology. I would highly suggest creating with the rear camera and having the world as your canvas for your art. Because I think that's where 3D and all those graphics shine when you get to design or incorporate your work into your environment. So I would suggest learning 3D modeling, texturing, rigging, animation, one step at a time. So in terms of trends in the community, one experience I can share is we're doing this thing where we incorporate these animations in face lenses. I think you can see one, just recently we have this pug sitting on your shoulder and it's like, just like looking at you and just like hanging your shoulder. There was one where we put in like realistic white tiger, just like hanging over your shoulder and stuff like that. Again, it goes back to the user, and I think as long as they keep creating and keep using, then I think that serves as our baseline of, okay, let's do more of the beautification or animal ears, stuff like that. If we're talking about tips and tricks, I highly recommend compressing your textures. So in-house, we use websites like tinypng.com, where you can just plug your textures in. If it's like 1 megabyte, it pretty much does a great job of resizing it down to, like 0.2, 0.3 megabytes. So that way, you get more space to create your lens experience. And augmented reality, I think part of that is reality. And in reality, there's life, there's movement. And I think that's where animation comes in. It does take time, but I think if there's consistent time that's put into it, I'm sure the experience and the skill just grows and grows, and eventually you'll get better. Lots of fun innovation for Lens Studio. When I started, we couldn't use joints yet. And then now we have LiDAR, we have land markers, we have all these amazing face lenses, marker, tracking, all the things that I've worked on here, I'm really proud to be part of, and really excited to continue, moving forward this technology. And everyone just needs to put in the time, and that includes me, to learn consistently. And eventually, we'll develop more experiences for everyone.
Hey Snapchatters, I'm Celia. I'm an official lens creator with Snapchat. I'm also a technical artist and 3D animator. Today I'm going to show you some tips and tricks in Lens Studio. We'll be going over how to build a lens, from 3D modeling to painting to Lens Studio. I always start with a sculpt, so let's start sculpting. Whenever I start sculpting, I start with a polysphere. I'm trying to build a character. In this first stage, I'm mostly getting the technical parts laid out, like the snout, the mouth bag, the eye bags, and where the eyelids are going to go. While I'm modeling, I'm always thinking about the topology. Topology is the most important thing modelers need to keep in mind when building a riggable character. Once I get all the technical parts laid out, I start building and defining features on the actual character. It's really important that I add in eyes. Once I make the eyes, I start adjusting my model to accommodate them. Eyes are a really critical part of the character expression template because it's the most receptive part of the user's experience. I see too many people just copying and pasting the template's default eyes. I can't stress enough how important it is to make your own original eyeballs. Once I've laid out the character silhouette, I'll start working on finer details. I'll start with the color. This isn't meant to be a final paint. I'm just adding color because I'm trying to map out where the fine details will go. In this pass, I want to capture things like scales, crevices, wrinkles. Like here, I'm defining the nose, nostrils, lip, corners, and cheekbones. What you see me doing here is masking out where all the scales are going to go. I know there are procedural ways to do this, but for this particular character, I wanted a very specific pattern. What I'm going to do with this mask is I'm going to elevate them a little bit to give the illusion of scales. Fine details like this give it a more professional look, while still making it feel pretty playful. Now that we have our model, let's retopologize in UV. When I'm retopoing, I mostly care a lot about getting the edge loops correct. This is probably the most technical I'm going to get with this model. Once I've built the low poly, I start UVing. Building the blend shapes is really time consuming, so I'm going to do that off screen. Now it's ready for some baking and paint. Painting is my favorite part. It's just the most satisfying. A lot of what the final render is going to look like takes place with painting. It's entirely possible to ruin a really great model with a really bad texture, so my job is to make this gecko look its best. I want to bring out those fine details we captured in the high poly, like the creases, the scales, and the eyelids. Let's get a nice texture on the eyeball too. Now that our gecko is ready, let's bring it into Lens Studio. Lens Studio is like the final package where you wrap everything together. Let's start with the character expressions template. Now let's drag and drop our assets in. So this includes the gecko model, the eyeball, and the textures. Next, we'll drag and drop our models into the Objects panel. Let's resize the model a bit so we can see it. And we're going to turn off this alien face so we can see what we're working with. And here, I'll get the character expression script to reference the gecko mesh I just imported. Let's pair up the eyes. Eyes are tricky because you have to make sure their transforms are zeroed out. Obviously, when you sculpt your model, you're not sculpting with the eyes at the origin, so you have to make that correction in Lens Studio. My personal preference is to work with whole numbers, and then make adjustments from there. Make sure you save your project as you work. Don't be losing your project halfway through. Let's add in our materials. Here I'm going to add some PBR graphs for the skin and eyes. Here we're uploading the textures from our paint job earlier. And pair up each texture sheet to its appropriate channel, starting with the base, normal, and param map. And here we're going to add in our materials for the eyeballs and the iris textures. I'm opening up the material editor here. I'm going to add some extra lighting effects to the eyeballs so they don't look so jarring. Now I'm sending the lens to my phone, and now I have a notification that's ready to preview. Oh, and here we go. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. I know it's minor changes, but these changes make a huge difference. Now that we have our preview, our icon, and our tags, now it's ready to be released into the wild. Hope you find it, have fun with it. I hope you all learned something along the way, and I'm excited to see what you all come up with. By the way, if you make something, make sure you snap me at CeliaSnap.
Hello, my name is Jérôme Rothfarb. I'm official lens creator for years and 3D artist since 2008. I ended up finding a quick technique which will allow you to create realistic character on your own, even if your skills are quite limited in 3D sculpting like me. It's a revolutionary AI tool, the Headshot plugin for character creator software. Usually, making a human character is a long and complicated task that requires manual modeling and skinning step, which is the bone creation and their influence on every articulation. Everything here is automated, and using just one good face photo with a neutral expression, I can very quickly create a full 3D character with a few clicks, and use the morph sliders to manually adjust all areas of the face and body, which will give me a lot of more time for the other steps. For the creation of clothes, I use Marvelous Designer, which is the most famous software in this domain. It's widely used in fashion, film, and video game industry. I start by drawing the pattern for each piece and connect the seams, then run the fabric simulation and adjust the folds. Once the outfit was exported, I quickly reduced the polygon count using the Instant Mesh software. Next, I import it in Substance Painter for textures and materials creation. Afterward, I re-import everything into Character Creator and test the articulation. I also import a model of sneakers, and when all is fine, I export everything in FBX. I took as reference the famous slam dunk of Michael Jordan in 1988. In Maya, the Human IK module helps me to create controllers and manipulate the character more efficiently. Then, I spend a lot of time creating poses, placing keyframes, and correcting animation curves. When the result seems natural and fluid, I export the whole scene in FBX format. In Lens Studio, I import the model, the animation, and the textures. The result is not yet finalized, but you can see this quick little overview.
Hi, this is Mohammed. In this Lens Studio tutorial, we are going to learn how to build a UI slider. The UI slider controls anything and everything that has a start value and end value. It can be a component, material, 3D model, and much more. So, let's get started. In this example, we are going to build a UI slider that controls an image alpha. First, let's upload our textures. After uploading our textures, let's create a new script and name it alpha. This script will contain the code that controls the image alpha. To find the code, we need to visit the image components guide on the official Lens Studio webpage. Copy the code that controls the alpha and paste it in our script that we named alpha. Now, we will add the image that we want to control it using the UI. On the plus button on the object panel, let's add a screen image. Let's add another screen image and change the alpha to 0. This image will hold the slider. By editing it, we can control the position, the size, and rotation of the slider. To keep everything clear, I named the objects with clear names. Now, under the holder image, we will add another image which will contain the slider background. After naming and resizing the slider background, now we will add our first icon that will control the alpha to 0. Selecting the holder, add a new screen image. Name it icon 1. To make the icon able to change the alpha, we need to add a touch component. In the inspector panel, add a new touch component. We need to select the mesh visual. It has to be the same object of the same image, which is icon 1. After that, we will include our script alpha. You may notice that there is some error on the logger. That is normal because we haven't defined the image yet. Let's define it with the cut image. After that, you will notice also that the image has been changed the alpha since I just defined it. But the target is I want to touch the icon, then the image will change it. So I will change initialize it to touch started. Now, if I touch the icon, the alpha changes. After that, we will duplicate the icon to 10 times and replace them side by side. From left to right, the alpha for each icon should be plus 0.1. After duplicating the icon to 10 times and changing each icon to 0.1 plus in value of the alpha, now we have the smoothest slider of the alpha. What we have so far, it has the function of a slider, but it doesn't look like one. What we have to do is when I touch any randomly icon, that icon should be enabled and the others disabled. It will give me the sense that I'm moving the icon with my finger. To do that, I have edited the script alpha by adding an array of images and putting the code inside a for loop, which means all the images I'm going to select with this script, they will have the same alpha at once. So let's try it. I have created a script and named it alpha. I will paste the code in it and try it with the first icon. In the inspector panel, I will drag and drop the script. I will change the target to the touch started, and in the object value, I will select all the icons I'm going to disable when I touch the first icon. I will skip the icon number 1 and I will disable all the others. Now let's try it. After doing the same thing to all other icons, we will have a little problem. The problem is all icons, they are just disabling other icons, but no one is enabling the one I'm touching right now. If I tried to use the slider right now, you will notice everything is just disappearing. So what is the solution of this problem? Well, the solution is super easy. For example, let's click on the first icon. We will use the first script we worked with, the alpha script. We will change the target to touch started. We will change the alpha to 1. And of course, the error on the logger because we haven't defined the image yet. We will define it with the same image we are using the script in. In this example, icon 1. If you notice, when we will try to use the slider, all the icons will disappear. But when I touch the first one, it's there. Let's do the same thing to others and come back. After doing the same thing to all other icons, now let's try our slider. It is smooth and perfect. One question, what if I just clicked on refresh? As you can see, the slider in miss, it has to have a by default value, and that depends on the creator, what he likes. In this example, I'm going to keep value 1 of the cat image by default. That means I will keep the last icon and change the others alpha value to 0. Now, after changing all the other icons alpha to 0, now we have the final UI slider. You can use this technique to make unlimited UI sliders with different styles, like this one right here. Very simple. Check this out. I've made this before 3 years. It was so fun. This is the end of the video. I hope you like it, guys, and thank you so much, Snapchat, for this amazing platform. Thank you all.
What's up, everyone? Mike Reporter here, aka Models by Mike 3D. Just to tell you a little about myself, I'm originally from Utah. I grew up in the Utah Valley area, but I've been living in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for the past 3 years. I'm married, I have 2 kids, and I graduated with a master's degree in molecular biophysics, but I decided to leave that behind, and now I write software. I got started in augmented reality almost a year and a half ago, kind of by accident. I was originally making simple little 3D models, and here I am now. My favorite lens I've made so far would have to be... I don't really have a favorite. I'd say I like them all equally. And so I have a few tips and tricks I'd like to show you in Lens Studio. Some things you might know, and there might also be some new features. So first, we're going to take a look at the text texture. Now you're probably all familiar with the screen text, which is just kind of 2D text overlaid, or a text object, which you can attach to like the user's face and it moves around with them. But there's also a third option, but you add it down in the resources panel. So you come here, you can add a text texture. So I'm just going to rename this to text texture. So what the text texture does is it takes your text and it turns it into an image. So you can use it the same as a text object up here. Or what's really cool is since it's an image, we can actually apply it to a curved surface like the soup can. But it does take a little bit of setup. Alright, so before we can apply our text texture to a curved surface, we do need to make sure our 3D object is set up correctly. So I'm going to head over to my 3D software. So I just have here a simple soup can, and here I have the UV map. So if you're not familiar with the UV map, it's essentially describing how the surface of your 3D object maps onto a 2D image, and that's how you get the texture to show up. So here I have the top and bottom lids on the gray, then I have the cylinder part of my can on this red and white portion of the image. And so over here, you can see my image applied to the soup can. Now, one thing I did do is I selected these faces here, and just to make it a little easier to see what's going on, I just gave it a different material, gave it a black color, just because this is where I want my label to go, and by making it a different material, I can just kind of keep track of where on the can it's going to show up in relation to the rest of the image. Also, what I want to do with these faces is I want to create a second UV map. Open up UV maps, add a new one, super simple. And then with my faces selected, I'm just going to unwrap those. Now they're over here. I'm going to select them. I want to rotate them 90 degrees because my selected face here is the last one. So I'm going to be the last one over here. I'm just going to grab that in. And I just want to kind of scale this, fill in the space as much as possible. Once I've done that, I just need to export my object. So File, Export as FBX, and then you just save it out. So once you do that, hop back into Lens Studio, load your object, or reload it if you need to. And let's get started with our materials. So if I select my soup can cylinder, so you have my can, then I have this other little section with label. So I already have a simple material set up called text. So if we look in the material editor, I'm just taking the input texture, multiplying it by a color, and then that's my final output. So when I set my text texture, I can just leave it as white. So let's go ahead and add some text. And now in my material properties, I can change this color to change the color of the text. So let's select my text texture. And now I'll come back to the cylinder. Now label is the material I want to change. So I'm going to go ahead and add text. And now you can see a few weird things going on. So the first issue is we can't really see the text. And that's because by default, when we make materials or we add UV coordinates, it's using surface UV coord 0. We want to use surface UV coord 1, which is our second UV map. So let's delete that and hook that up. Now you can see our text is now filling that space, but we can see behind it. That is because the texture being applied here is just the text. So we also want to see what's behind it. So we want to go back to just the can. So here on my portion of the mesh that has the text, I'm going to choose material, and I'm going to go into my soup can, add the other one, drag it up to the top, and then on my text, let's go ahead and change that color so we can see it a little better. All right, so we can see it, but you kind of see how it's kind of flickering. That's because it's on the same level as our can texture. So we're just going to turn off depth test here in the material properties, and we are good. So we can change the color just right here. Let's go ahead and make it blue. And that is about it. Now there are a few drawbacks with the text texture. So we can change the font. That does work. So you can import any font you want. But outline and drop shadow do not work. So that's just something to be aware of. If you're going to use the text texture, you just get the straight up font. Now, the other issue is we have a predefined area where our text goes. And so if we have really short text, like hi, it gets really stretched out. And if we put longer text, you can see that starts squishing together. And that's not necessarily something that we want either. So I do have a scalable text material here we can take a look at. So I'm just going to replace that. Let's add the text texture. All right, and let's go back to a short text just to take a quick look. Okay, so my scalable text, I can change the scale of the UVs. So let's put this to 2. So we shrink our text, but now you can see it's tiling. Now we can clamp the UV parameters. So let's come to the material editor. Let's switch over to our scalable text. And so all I'm doing is I'm just scaling the coordinates and then clamping from 0 to 1. So that just gets you back to the original coordinates. Now this looks like it might work. Let's make this just a little bit bigger so we can see our text better. But there are still some issues here you have to be aware of with clamp. So the word hello works fine, but let's change this to your name. And let's go to a different font. And now you can see we kind of get these bands coming off the sides. That's because when you clamp a texture, whatever is on the border of that texture, it just kind of gets extended out in both directions. And so depending on your font and your letters, you might get these bands going out. So you can see it doesn't happen with all letters, but Y is a pretty common one I see. So if you are going to try to clamp your UV chords, you just got to watch out for that. But they look okay enough if you just don't scale it, just add the text there. So we have our text on the curved surface, everything's good, but I mean, if we're just going to put some words here, we might as well have put it in our UV map over here in our 3D software. But if we use this text texture, now we can dynamically set it. So here I have a simple script I've already added to the scene called set name. So let's open up the script editor. So here I'm just going to grab the user's display name and I'm going to set it to the text here. Now, if I add like a text object or screen text, how I would add that is I put the input on my script. And so I would say something like script.canlabel.text equals name. But that does not work with the text texture. Instead, we're going to do script.canlabel.control.text and set that equal to name. So if it's a text object, you just do script dot whatever name you gave it dot text. If it's a text texture, it's technically an image, so we can't directly set the text. So we have to go dot control dot text. And now, if I save my script, you can see it updates to the user's display name over here. So you can use any of the dynamic text. If you want to know what's available, just look up the global user context system in the Lens Studio docs, and you can see what all you can access through the scripting API. All right, so hopefully you've been able to learn a couple things. The screen texture, I like it a lot. It's kind of like a render target without all the power, but can keep things a little simpler. And the text texture is pretty cool. If you just need 2D text, just use what's built in. But if you need to stick your text on an object, especially if it needs to be dynamic, you want to put in like the date or the user's name or something. The text texture is awesome. Like we saw, it does have a few limitations, not everything's quite working, but the ability to put the text on any surface is super cool. So go ahead and give those features a try, and let's see what you can make. My piece of advice for other creators is to be yourself and make things that make you and others happy. Make sure it doesn't become a chore. Make sure you're enjoying what you're doing, because it is a lot of fun. I think that's how a lot of us got started. It's just fun to do. So as you're creating things, just make sure you don't lose that spark, and just remember that the world needs some joy, and you can help spread that joy.